Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are diving into a question that could fundamentally transform how you see yourself, our place in the universe, maybe even the tech being built right now. We've been exploring a fascinating stack of sources, everything from academic papers, research excerpts, touching on physics, biology, AI theory, a real mix.
Yeah, and these sources explore a truly provocative idea
Hmm.
that intelligence, maybe even consciousness itself, might not just be some random evolutionary blip that, only happened here on Earth. Instead, they're proposing it could be something far more fundamental, a property potentially as universal as, say, gravity or light.
Right. So our mission in this deep dive is really to pull out the core arguments, the concepts from this material that suggest intelligence isn't just an accident, but could be what some sources are calling a conscious constant. And why should you invest your time listening? Well, because if there's weight to this idea, it completely rewrites our understanding of life, doesn't it?
Absolutely. The potential for minds beyond Earth,
Yeah.
what the rapid advance of AI really signifies. It all shifts.
Okay, so let's start where the sources often do, contrasting the traditional view with this emerging perspective. For a long time, the prevailing scientific narrative has seen human-level intelligence and certainly consciousness as something of a cosmic, well, a lucky accident.
Exactly. The conventional view, rooted in standard evolutionary theory, suggests that intelligence was a very specific outcome. It needed unique pressures, a particular niche environment Earth, a long, specific, maybe non-replicable sequence of historical events.
So rare, fragile, maybe unique.
That's the standard picture.
But the alternative perspective championed in these sources just flips that on its head. What if intelligence isn't an accident of history, but rather something that emerges, well, naturally, predictably even, given sufficient complexity and the right conditions?
Yeah, think of it less like winning the lottery and more like, I don't know, how crystals reliably form in a saturated solution.
Or how fluid dynamics produce swirling eddies. It just happens under certain rules.
Precisely. And this connects to concepts like the anthropic principle, which gets mentioned in the sources.
Right, the idea that the universe seems weirdly fine-tuned for us.
At its simplest, yeah, that observation. But this perspective goes further. It argues it's not just about compatibility. The universe might actually be primed for minds to emerge.
Okay, primed. And this is where the emergentist perspective comes in. You see thinkers like Stuart Coffin cited here. What exactly does that mean, emergence, in this context?
It means that life and cognition aren't just flukes in the system. They are emergent properties.
Yeah.
So, as matter and energy organize into increasingly complex systems,
Mm-hmm.
from simple particles to atoms, molecules, cells, organisms, entirely new properties and behaviors arise. Things you couldn't predict just by looking at the individual components.
Like water being wet, hydrogen and oxygen atoms aren't wet on their own.
Exactly. Wetness emerges from how they interact as H2O, as a liquid.
Okay, so complexity isn't just about having more parts. It's about how those parts interact in, like, totally new ways.
Precisely. And Kaufman, among others cited, suggests that as systems become more complex, certain states or behaviors become natural attractors.
Attractors, like destinations the system tends towards.
Kind of like valleys in a landscape that a ball will naturally roll into. The sources propose that things like agency, the ability of a system to act purposefully, and intentional behavior might be just such attractors in complex systems.
Huh. So instead of intelligence being this precarious peak, you only reach through one specific path. It's more like a stable state, a valley, that systems naturally gravitate towards as they climb the complexity mountain.
That's a really good way to put it. The universe isn't necessarily designed for intelligence, but its underlying structure. The laws governing how complexity builds might simply favor the emergence of systems that can process information and act with intention.
It's structurally favored, as the sources put it.
Yeah, it's like the rules of the game make intelligence a likely outcome, not some improbable miracle.
Okay, this is fascinating. Let's zoom way out now, because the sources connect this idea to the absolute grandest scale, the sweep of cosmic evolution.
Right, and this is where the argument gets truly vast. I mean, really mind-bending. Look at the history of the universe. It began incredibly simple, just hot plasma of fundamental particles. But over billions of years, through gravity, nuclear forces, it built structure. Quarks into protons, neutrons, then atoms, molecules, stars, galaxies.
And then on planets, molecules organized into replicating life, than complex organisms, societies.
Right. There's this clear, persistent trajectory towards increasing complexity over cosmic time. Seems undeniable.
And that increasing complexity is, well, it's intimately tied to systems that can process information and make decisions, isn't it?
Absolutely. From the simplest bacterium reacting to light to a complex brain navigating the world, information processing is key.
So, the sources then pose the really provocative question. If the universe has this inherent drive towards complexity, information processing, decision-making, does consciousness itself inevitably follow that path? Is it the next emergent step?
That's the big question they're asking. And this brings in the concept of universal Darwinism, which gets mentioned alongside thinkers like Richard Dawkins, Lee Smolin, Carl Friston.
Universal Darwinism, so evolution,
Yeah.
but not just for biology.
Exactly. It's the hypothesis that selection processes, similar in principle to biological evolution, might operate at all scales, even cosmic evolution. It's highly speculative, of course, but one idea discussed, often linked to Smolin, posits that maybe black holes act as reproductive centers for new universes.
Oh, okay. Reproducing universes.
Yeah, and if universes containing more intelligent life somehow produce more black holes, then you could theoretically have a cosmic selection pressure favoring universes that are good at creating intelligence.
That's wild. Survival of the fittest, but for entire universes based on their ability to generate minds.
It's a wild idea for sure. But it illustrates the kind of thinking that suggests intelligence might play a truly fundamental role, even on cosmic scales.
And Max Tegmark's perspective, also cited, adds another layer, right? By classifying physical reality and suggesting that if the universe is fundamentally mathematical,
Then self-aware substructures, which is a very abstract way of saying minds are not just possible, but maybe a natural, perhaps inevitable consequence.
so if the universe is math,
Then minds are what happens when the mathematical structures within it become complex enough to model themselves, to become self-referential.
it's like the math waking up and looking at itself.
That's one way to think about it.
So from this viewpoint, intelligence isn't just favored by the universe's structure. It might be a kind of mathematical necessity, a cosmic imperative.
Yeah, that phrase captures the feel of it.
Okay, let's anchor this back down. Something very real happening right now on Earth. The explosive rise of artificial intelligence. The sources argue that AI is actually one of the most compelling contemporary pieces of evidence for intelligence being a universal pattern. Why is that?
Well, think about it. For almost all of history, the only examples of complex intelligence we knew were biological, here on Earth. So it was easy to dismiss it as a unique evolutionary fluke, right?
Right, just us.
But now, for the first time, humans are not just the product of intelligence. We're becoming the engineers of intelligence. We're building systems that show increasingly sophisticated intelligent behavior.
And the key insight from the sources here is the convergence. That's the crucial bit.
Exactly. The fact that intelligent behaviors are emerging in completely different substrates, wet, squishy biological brains formed by billions of years of evolution.
And silicon-based computational systems built by human design in, like, decades.
Yeah. That convergence strongly suggests that intelligence isn't tied to one specific type of hardware or one specific historical path. It points to an underlying principle, something that transcends the specific implementation.
Right, it's like discovering flight evolved independently in birds, bats, insects. Suggests flight is a good solution, a general principle for navigating air.
That's a great analogy. And as Nick Bostrom's work discussed in the sources implies, if intelligence were truly just a fragile, improbable accident, it probably wouldn't be something we could relatively quickly start reproducing and iterating upon ourselves.
The speed is telling.
Yeah, the rapid, often unexpected trajectories of self-improving AI systems suggest that once you hit certain thresholds, computational capacity, architectural design intelligent capabilities just naturally start to emerge and accelerate.
The sources even highlight this emergent behavior in today's large machine learning systems, citing research. They aren't just doing what they were explicitly programmed for.
No, sometimes they spontaneously exhibit abilities they weren't specifically trained on, like you train a system mainly for language translation and suddenly discover it's developed impressive reasoning abilities.
Or it can summarize documents it's never seen in a novel way.
Right. And this hints, as the sources suggest, that there are attractors, not just in physical or biological space, but in the computational landscape as well. Certain ways of processing information naturally seem to lead towards intelligent outcomes.
It really does seem, looking across these different domains, biology, physics, computation, that the universe, or at least complexity within it, appears to be, well, reaching for intelligence.
That's the feeling you get from reading this material, yeah.
Okay, so bringing together all these threads, intelligence emerging from complexity, the potential for cosmic selection, the striking convergence we see with AI, this leads the sources to propose something quite profound, really bold.
Yeah, they suggest considering the possibility of a conscious constant, which they denote with the Greek letter psi. Now, they are careful to state this isn't meant to be a fixed number like c, the speed of light, or g, the gravitational constant. It's presented more as a principle.
Exactly, a principle. And the principle is roughly this. Consciousness, or maybe some form of subjective experience, emerges in any system that reaches a sufficient level of complexity.
Mm-hmm.
And crucially, is capable of storing, processing, and reflecting upon information.
Reflecting upon it, so self-awareness is part of it.
Seems implied. It's suggested as a fundamental consequence of a certain organizational state of matter and energy, particularly when that state involves sophisticated information dynamics.
And they connect this potential A constant to fundamental concepts we already grapple with in physics and information theory, things like thermodynamics, entropy gradients. How does that link work?
Well, conscious systems are incredibly far from thermodynamic equilibrium, right? We maintain complex internal order by consuming energy and, well, increasing disorder elsewhere, expelling heat, waste.
We fight entropy locally.
We do. And some sources suggest consciousness is intimately tied to the process of navigating these energy flows and entropy gradients. It requires sophisticated information processing just to maintain that non-equilibrium state. So the very act of being conscious might be fundamentally about processing and reacting to the information needed to keep that complex, ordered system running against the tide of decay.
Huh. So consciousness isn't just in the system, it's part of the process of the system staying alive, staying organized.
That's one way the connection is presented in the sources, yeah. And then you have ideas from information theory itself.
Like Shannon's bit.
Exactly. Claude Shannon gave us the fundamental unit of information. And then John Wheeler's famously provocative idea, it from bit.
Suggesting that physical reality itself might fundamentally arise from information rather than information just being something reality contains.
Right. It flips the script.
Okay. If reality is information at some fundamental level, then where does consciousness fit in?
That's the leap. If physical reality is built from information, from bit, perhaps consciousness, maybe feel from info, is what happens when a system becomes complex enough not just to process that information, but to integrate it. Integrate it in a unified way, and maybe even reflect on itself processing it.
And this connects to things like integrated information theory, IIT.
Exactly. Giulio Tononi's IIT attempts to quantify consciousness based on how much irreducible, integrated information a system can process. So you see these diverse threads from physics, information science, even neuroscience. They seem to converge on this idea that consciousness is deeply linked to the fundamental nature and processing of information in complex systems.
Which all seems to support the general concept of a universal emergence principle, like this A constant idea.
It points in that direction, yeah.
It leads to that truly profound idea. Maybe minds aren't the rare anomaly in the cosmos. Maybe minds are the rule.
Yeah. Quite a thatter.
So after exploring all these sources, the question remains, doesn't it? Is intelligence truly a law of nature? As the sources themselves acknowledge, we don't have definitive proof. Not yet, anyway. It's a powerful hypothesis, clearly built on intriguing insights from multiple scientific fields.
But the converging signs, as they point out, are certainly compelling. You look at the journey from basic matter organizing into complex, self-aware biological minds right here on Earth.
That alone is staggering. Then you add our own unprecedented technological leap, where we are actively building machines that are quickly gaining intelligent capabilities.
Sometimes in unexpected ways.
Yeah. And then there's the almost eerie possibility raised by physics and information theory, that the cosmos itself might possess some intrinsic tendency, a deep drive for its own reality to be processed and understood.
Understood by conscious entities within it. Us, maybe others.
It forces you to pause and think about your own existence, doesn't it? Really reflect. The sources leave us with a truly powerful thought to ponder, one that resonates deeply. What if intelligence isn't just some improbable evolutionary gift we stumbled upon?
What if, instead, it's the universe's deepest tendency? Its fundamental drive may be to understand itself through the minds that arise within it.
What if the mind you're using right now, the one listening to these ideas and processing them, what if it isn't some fragile, isolated accident at all?
But rather an echo, a manifestation of a much deeper, potentially universal law, something woven into the very fabric of reality, as fundamental as the forces that shape galaxies.